Hello, welcome to my stream. Today I'm going to be building some fireworks. Now I've already built some fireworks a couple of days ago if you've been watching. So you can see here's one of them here. But at the moment there's just one firework. Oh no, there's two. There's a red one and a blue one. So two fireworks is kind of boring. Actually, I saw two fireworks once. I went down to the fireworks down the road and I had gotten there a bit late and I saw the last two. And it was a bit disappointing. So I'm going to try and add a lot of fireworks. And to do that, I am going to use JavaScript. So the thing about the fireworks here is that they're created using plain HTML and CSS. So this is all created using a bunch of plain old elements and plain old styles. So instead of manually writing all of these out though, I want to create some JavaScript which dynamically adds all of the code that I need. And that way I can create lots of different fireworks with different colors and different positions. And it is going to look a lot nicer, hopefully. So let me get started by adding a script tag, which I need to write my script. And I'm going to write a function. I'm going to write a render firework function. So the function is a chunk of code which you can call over and over again. So I'm going to call render firework once. Just what I'm going to do is I'll reproduce what we've already got, which is two fireworks, one red and one blue. So let's start by calling render firework twice, and we'll set the color of one to red and the color of another to blue. And the other thing about these two fireworks is they're in different positions. So let me just figure out what the positions of these two are. I've got F1 and F2. So I see, I'm using a transform to move that firework. So a translate transform moves the thing to a different position on the screen. It sort of translates it left or up or down or that kind of thing. So but instead of doing that, I'm just gonna set a left and a top. That's, I think, a little bit easier to reason about. Okay, so now I've called this render firework function twice. I just have to actually implement it. And if you watched my stream yesterday, you'll have already seen one way of doing this. So I'm just going to follow basically mostly the same pattern. The thing about yesterday's one is I was making Sakura, and Sakura, like each of the petals only had 4 divs, whereas this has, at the moment, 12. And maybe I want to have more divs, or maybe I want to have a variable number of divs, because fireworks, they can change depending on, how the thing explodes, I guess, in the real world, or how you want it to look for this. So, yeah, let me start by creating the wrapper div. So to do that, I'm going to call it firework wrapper. And if I call document.createElement, what this lets me do is it lets me create one of these divs, and then I can manually assign attributes to it. So I want to assign a class attribute. Even if the attribute here is called class, when you use JavaScript, you have to use class name. And that's because class is a reserved word. It's like function. It means something in JavaScript. So I'm going to set this to, what am I going to set it to? Firework? Yeah, I'm just going to set this to firework. I haven't even got a firework class, but I'll add one later on. And then, instead of having 12 lines to add each of these, what I'll do is I'll use a for loop. So a for loop is a piece of code which lets me run a line over and over again, a specific number of times. So let me explain. Well, I'm not going to explain this. I'm going to explain a little bit less than usual. If you want me to explain something, you can write something in the chat over here if you're watching live, and I'll try and keep my eyes on that. So I'm going to assume you understand what this does. Basically, it just runs this line or everything inside these braces 12 times. And so I'm going to create a dot 12 times. And the way I do that is I do document.createElementDiv. So I create a dot, I set the class to dot. Now this T1 to T12 classes, these, all they do is they set a transform. So I could do it this way, but I think an easier way to do this would be to just set the transform directly by setting the style. And that would be just like adding a style attribute here with transform. So that gives me a little bit more freedom to, I guess, change this to like, I guess, change the parameters here for each firework. So I'm gonna what am I doing? I'm rotating, not translating. And here, this is an interesting thing. If you've, I'm just going to use the template string here. This lets me interpolate variables in. So I can, for each time this is executed, I is going to be a number between 0 and 12. So 360 divided by 12 is, I should know this, I'm going 30. It's 30, right? So I times 30, this is going to give me a number between 0 and 330. Yeah, because I never reaches 12. It'll be a number between 0 and 11. Okay, so that translates the dot around the center. And then I have to, okay, that's a start. So I'm going to wrapper.add child. Actually, before I do that, there's also a dot inner. You can see here that the way I'm doing this is I've actually got an inner div inside the outer div. So let's create that too. And dot inner dot class name equals inner. Then I'll append that to the dot. And then I'll append the dot to the wrapper. Okay, so this should create 12 of these. Famous last words. So I'm going to get rid of all these classes because I don't need them anymore because I'm setting those transforms directly on the styles. And where do I set the color? I see. So the color is set here. It's set on the inner. So I'm going to set the color on the inner.style. Background color equals options.color. You can see with because I'm passing these options through inside the braces, I can then do options.color. And last, I need to set this left and top somewhere. So each fireworks left and top is, actually before I do that, the left and top is set based on this transform here. So I can get rid of this. And one thing at a time, James. I'm going to add this transform. This transform was only applied to F1. But F1 and F2 are these outer divs. So that outer is the wrapper. So I want to add that position here. Using again, I think I'm going to use a transform, a translate transform this time. So again, I can use this template string. These are special backticks. This is the button on your keyboard at the top left underneath escape. So I want to put in options.left for the x coordinate because I called it left here. Add pixels, px pixels, then options.right. Not right, it was top, wasn't it? Yeah, top for the Y coordinate. So I've set the position, I've set the color, I've set the rotation so that we have 12 dots and they're all rotating around that center point. And okay, so this is the other thing I've done is I've added an animation delay. This second number on the animation property is the delay. I'm going to just remove that for now. I can add that later using JavaScript. So for F1 and F2, that's this dot, this div and this div. So these are my wrapper divs, and I'm applying both of the same styles to these now that I've removed all those other things and set them using a style property. So I can merge these into a single, I'm going to call it firework class. I've already called it firework. I've applied this class to the wrapper. So I'm going to merge these into a firework class. So now all fireworks will have this class. And then let's reorder these so that they're in the same order as their, this is the outer, and then this one is inside, well, there's 12 of these inside this, and then there's one of these inside each of these. Okay, so I think those styles are correct. Now I'm going to remove these and run this page, refresh the page and see what happens. Nothing happens, of course nothing happens. It's very unusual for anything to work the first time, especially when you're not using TypeScript. So let's see if I can figure out why nothing is happening. I'm going to open the JavaScript console and see if any errors are occurring. Are any errors occurring? Not that I can see. So what have I not done? Well, I have not added the wrapper to the body. I'm not adding these. I'm creating these elements, but you actually have to add them to the document body if you want them to appear. So that's what I haven't done. Okay, let me refresh. Oh, that hasn't fixed it either. So let me start by just going over this again. I got wrapper, adding that to the document body. I'm going to add alert just to make sure the code is working at all. Yep. So you get to see me debugging broken code now. It's always interesting to see someone else debugging code. Maybe, I don't know. maybe I'm being too generous to myself. Okay, so let's write a console.log here and look back in the inspector to see that this is being run 12 times. It is. So, here we go. Null is not an object, evaluating document.body.append child. Really? What have I done wrong? Null is not an object. Anyone wanna? Okay, so here is where I open up the one I was doing yesterday and I see how I did it then. Because I could Google for it, but sometimes it's easier to just look for old code. So just briefly, that document, that null is not an object means that I'm probably named something wrong. So in this one yesterday, I also did document.body.append child. That's exactly the same. Wrapper is... no, never mind. So let me log wrapper. Let me see what is the value of wrapper. Refresh. That's correct. So this console is saying that wrapper is a div. Then I get to log, I'm going to log document.body.append child. That's not working. So let me try document.body is null. Why is document.body now? I haven't added the body element. Now this is interesting. It's interesting to me that you can style the body element without adding the body element, but you can't use the body element in JavaScript without adding the body element. Okay. Well, we can see something now. It's not exactly what I wanted to see, but I'm getting somewhere. I haven't put degrees here. You have to specify the units when you're doing a lot of things with CSS. So by default, I probably was using radians. Hey, we got 2 fireworks. Okay, so now I want to add that delay. So before I had one and then I had the next one. So to do that, I'll use the same thing that I did yesterday. I'm just going to keep adding fireworks with a delay, one after another. So I'm going to append the child. Then this is not scheduling another one. This is just removing the existing one, which is also important to do so that the browser doesn't jam up when it's rendering like a million fireworks, but that's not exactly what I wanted. What I wanted to do, I'm just going to do it from scratch, is I want to actually do a new render firework once every 1 second, so 1000 milliseconds. That's what this here does. This will call this code between the braces once every 1000 milliseconds. So if I do this, it's just going to render the same firework once every second. But what I want to do is I want to render a different firework once every second. I want to change the color and change the position. So to get let's start by changing the position. I want the firework to render with a left somewhere between here, and a top somewhere between here and here. So I need to know the width and the height of the window. And to do that, I can do width equals document.body, same thing as here. And I think it's client width. And then for the height, it's document.body.client height. So I can just times that by math.random, which gives me a number between 0 and 1. So a number between 0 and 1 times the width is going to give me a random left somewhere between here and here. And I'll do the same for the top. A different random number times height. So this should give me a firework somewhere on the page every second. Now the problem is it's giving me all over the place, and I think this is because of my CSS transforms. This is going to be a little bit interesting to figure out. Well, let me start by fixing the obvious problem, which is now there's these scroll bars, because I guess if the firework is added somewhere off the screen, then you have that, then it adds a scroll bar so that you can scroll to it. So I can fix that by adding this overflow hidden property to the body, which is the element which renders this whole thing. So that gets rid of the scroll bars. Now I've got to figure out how to actually position those fireworks where I want them to be. So, now the problem is, if you have a look at this, my firework element is taking up the whole screen, which is kind of silly. If I add like background color green, yeah, you can see that each firework is like covering the entire area. I don't want to do that. I want to get rid of this width 100, height 100, which is what makes it take the whole screen. And what does that do? Well, now we can see them over here. Is that just blind luck? It says top 50, left 50. Here we go. I've just saw it at the left, the right, and the top, so this is obviously working now. I don't know why I had put those funny positions in. I might have been part of a demo from the last stream when I did this. Okay, and this position absolute, this just says that I want the dots to be positioned relative to something. I don't even need that, right? No, I did need that. This is where I'm not actually sure why I even need this. No, I am, sorry. Position absolute means that all of these dots are going to be rendered on top of each other, and then I can transform them into a different position. But otherwise, yeah, I'm not going to try and explain that. I'll maybe do that another time if someone wants me to explain it. But for now, I want to get a random color happening for these fireworks and a few other random things. So how do you do a random color? Well, instead of using a named color, like I'm doing here, what I'm going to do is use the RGB format for color, which lets me specify three numbers between 0 and 255, which are the red, green, and blue components. So you know on your screen, if you look up really close with a microscope, you'll see there's like red, green, blue dots for each pixel. So you're just saying how much you want them to be turned on or turned off. So I want numbers between 255 and 0. So basically I want 3 random numbers, and I could copy this into like this, but then that line is going to get really long, so it's harder to read. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put those numbers in constants. And actually, this might not work. Let's see if it works, and if it doesn't, I'll explain why. Oh, it worked. I'm surprised. The reason I thought it might not work is because, well, these are numbers with decimal. I mean, this number, if let me just do alert red so you can see what I'm talking about. This number has like a whole bunch of decimal places. So I was thinking maybe you can't put decimals in red, green, blue, but you can. So that's okay. Let me remove this so that it doesn't keep doing this. So I've got lots of fireworks, random colors at different points in the screen. What else can we randomize to make these look nicer? Well, I think given they're fireworks, you don't want them to have exactly the same delay between each firework. That's kind of doesn't feel realistic. So that's one thing I can randomize. Another is I could randomize the size, like how big is that firework? Another is I could randomize the number of dots in it. So I'm going to try to randomize as many of these different things as I can. So I'm going to start with the number of dots because that's easy to do. Right here you can see that this loop runs 12 times, and that's why we've got 12 dots. So instead of doing 12, I can get a random number between, say, how do I get a random number between, for example, 10 and 20? So you do 10 plus math.random times 10, which is a number between 0 and 10. Of course, I probably want this to be an actual integer. So I don't want it to have a decimal place. So to do that, I'm going to pass this number to a function called math.floor. And what that does is it just rounds it down. It discards everything after the decimal place. So I'm going to log this just so you can see that it works. If I pass something to console.log, then it's going to appear in this console, which you can get in the inspector. So you'll see this is coming up with a bunch of different numbers. Yeah, it's actually logging it. Why is it coming up with... I should remove this. I had 2 logs, and one of them was inside the for loop, so it was being called, well, however many times this number was coming out as. Okay, so that's working. So what I want to do now is, instead of just logging the number, I want to actually adjust the number of dots. So the first part to that is change this, obviously. The second part is I need to change the angle, because if I still have the angle between each dot is 30 degrees, then it's still only going to look like there's 12 dots. So to do that, probably what I want to do is do angle between dots equals 360 over number of dots. Then I can substitute this in here and refresh. There we go. So I've got a random number of dots in each firework now. Next thing, I want to randomize the size of the firework. So I want some small and some big. That's easy enough to do, I think, using a scale transform. And so the way I would do that is I would add another part to this transform here. I would add a scale part. I don't know if this is going to work, putting them on separate lines like this. I've never tried it before, but let's take a look. So let me say scale equals, well, let me just inject the scale instead of, actually I'm going to do this first. So I'm gonna come up with this scale here. Math.random 1 plus math.random. So that's going to be a number between 1 and 2. So I can pass this in, and I don't actually have to write it like this. If the left-hand side is scale and the right-hand side is scale, I can just say scale. So that's going to make a scale property available in this object here. So I can say options.scale. Is this going to work? No. Wait. Why is it sometimes working and sometimes not working? That's bizarre. I see. The reason is because the scale, is it because the scale is before the translate? Yeah, that's why it was. I was scaling because the scale was before the translate was also being scaled, so that was making it possible to have the firework off the other side of the screen. It's interesting how the different transforms compose like that. So I think this looks ugly, honestly. I think some of these are too big. So I'm going to turn this down. I'm going to make it between 0.5 and 1.5. Okay, and so the next thing, actually, let me just go back one moment. Now, you'll see that I have this number of dots. This number of dots variable I'm making from a random number this way, whereas all the rest of in this spot, whereas the rest of the random numbers are being generated here. And usually I like to keep calls to math.random outside of a function, because you want functions usually to be predictable. You want them to do exactly the same thing if you pass the same options in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this number of dots out of the function, and I'm going to put it here so that the function always does exactly the same thing when called with the same arguments. So I could put now this number of dots constant doesn't exist within this function anymore. I have to pull it out of options. And I'm gonna say number of dots equals options dot number of dots. There are other ways of doing this, but I'll leave it at that for now. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to randomize the amount of time between fireworks. Well, let me start by just seeing how different values look. So this is going to be one firework every half a second, which already looks a lot nicer. But I think it would be nice to have some sort of randomness between these. So the problem is I can't just put a random number here, because you'll see this set interval function is only called once. And so if I put a random number here, it's just going to set the interval. I mean, it'll always use that same random interval. It's kind of like rolling a dice once, like in the XK. I don't know if you've seen the comic, but you know, if you roll a dice once and always use that number, it's not really a random number anymore. So to do this, I can't use set interval. I have to use something else called set timeout. And what set timeout does is it, instead of calling it over and over again, it just calls it once. And I'm using the same thing here to clean up after myself, in fact. Of course, if it's only called once, you have to then call it again with a new random number. And so how am I going to do this? What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull all of this, this code here, out into a new function called render random firework. And this doesn't have any arguments because all of the arguments, it's all the code it needs is here. And then I'm going to and I'm going to render one of them immediately. And each time render random firework runs, I'm going to set a timeout to run the same function again. And I'm going to use a random interval. So delay until next equals math.random. I'm gonna give it some time between 300 milliseconds and 800 milliseconds. Let's give this a shot and see how it looks. So this is kind of recursive. This is sometimes takes a little bit of thinking to get your head around how this works, but let me just refresh this. There we go. That looks more like how I was imagining it was going to look. So let me explain what's going on here. So I have this function, render random firework. It's a bit of a tongue twister. I have render random firework, and I call that once as soon as the script has loaded. So as soon as the page has loaded. And that gets all these random numbers, makes all these random numbers, and it passes them to render firework, which does the work of actually adding the HTML and some styles to the page. And it does the work of cleaning up that HTML in 3 seconds after that. But once we've rendered that firework, I get another random number, this delay until next, and that's going to be between 300 and 800. And I use this set timeout function, and I actually pass a function to set timeout. So you've seen me pass numbers to functions, but it's also, and objects like here, but it's also possible to pass functions to functions. And so that's what this is doing here. This set timeout function will call the function that you pass it the specified number of seconds later. And that's how you get these fireworks. So that's my 30 minutes for today. So thank you for watching, and I hope you've learned something. I'm going to take a break over the weekend, so I'll probably be back with another stream on Monday. If there's something you'd like to see me make, leave a comment or send me a tweet. Otherwise, I haven't got any ideas just yet, so I'll see what I'll build next week. I'll put this code up on GitHub as always, and I'll link it in the comments. But yeah, that's it for me. Thanks for watching. Bye.